The FBI investigates.
That includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
For the first time, Director James Comey confirms the FBI is looking into Russia's involvement in the 2016 election. Supreme Court confirmation hearing. Judge Neil Gorsuch provides opening statements to a Senate panel. Asking forgiveness. The Holy Father apologizes to the president of Rwanda for the sins and failings of the church during the 1994 genocide. And Mother Angelica Monday.
I love you, so just God loves you more. Bye now.
Our weekly words of wisdom from our foundress on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, March 20th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. FBI Director James Comey confirms that the Bureau is investigating links between Russia and associates of President Trump. It's part of a broader probe of Russian interference into the 2016 presidential election. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee has the details from the White House. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The FBI director's admission is the first public confirmation of an investigation that began this past summer. Comey also answered questions about President Trump's tweets on wiretapping, saying the FBI has no information to support those tweets.
The FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
An extraordinary revelation by FBI Director James Comey as he and NSA Director Mike Rogers face lawmakers over alleged wiretapping and Russian hacks. Republicans are focusing on news coverage and possible improper disclosures of classified information.
We aim to determine who has leaked or facilitated leaks of classified information so that these individuals can be brought to justice.
Democrats pressing for details on the status of the investigation.
Only by understanding what the Russians did can we inoculate ourselves from further Russian interference.
Comey contradicted a series of tweets from President Trump accusing then-President Barack Obama of wiretapping Trump Tower during the campaign.
I have no information that supports those tweets.
President Trump took to Twitter before the hearing began, saying the real story that Congress, the FBI, and others should be looking into is the leaking of classified information. Must find leaker now. The White House is refusing to back down.
I think that when you get to the bottom of it, we'll have a much better picture of what's happening, and I think it'll continue to vindicate him.
Sean Spicer says today's hearing revealed no evidence that Russian hacking changed any of the votes in the 2016 presidential election. Lauren?
Wyatt, can you tell us the timeline of the FBI investigation and the next steps for Congress?
Lauren, Director Comey says it's quote-unquote impossible to estimate how long the FBI's investigation will take. As for Congress, the Senate Intelligence Committee has scheduled another hearing, a follow-up hearing, for later this month. Lauren?
Thank you, Wyatt. President Trump welcomes the leader of Iraq to the White House as the two countries work together to fight ISIS. It's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi's first visit to Washington since Donald Trump's inauguration, and it comes before the president hosts a 68-nation meeting on fighting the militant group. Al-Abadi has already received one concession from the Trump administration. Iraq was removed from the list of countries affected by the president's revised immigration order. Vice President Mike Pence meets with the ProLife Caucus tonight at the White House. He tweeted after the last discussion that he wants the pro-life movement to know the president is committed to life when it comes to the Obamacare replacement plan. The ProLife Caucus is co-chaired by Republican Representative Chris Smith and Democrat Representative Dan Lipinski. The Senate begins confirmation hearings for President Trump's Supreme Court pick, Judge Neil Gorsuch, of the Denver-based 10th U.S. Circuit Court. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us from the hearing on Capitol Hill. Jason.
Lauren, Neil Gorsuch is promising to be an independent if confirmed to the High Court. Today he said it's for Congress to make the laws, for the executive to enforce them, and for neutral, independent judges to apply them. But his confirmation could be a bitter partisan fight.
Judge Neil Gorsuch comes before 20 members of the Judiciary Committee. Chairman Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa says Gorsuch will preserve the Constitution.
We have before us today a nominee whose body of professional work is defined by an unfailing commitment to these principles. His grasp on the separation of powers, including judicial independence, enlivens his body of work.
But pro-abortion Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein of California says she's concerned.
He wrote that he believes there are no exceptions to the principle that, quote, the intentional taking of a human life by private persons is always wrong, end quote. This language has been interpreted by both pro-life and pro-choice organizations to mean he would overturn Roe.
Gorsuch, who is 49, is a respected, highly credentialed, and conservative judge. His legal philosophy is close to Justice Antonin Scalia, who died 13 months ago. As an appellate judge, Gorsuch ruled in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor and Hobby Lobby craft stores. Gorsuch saying the Health and Human Services contraceptive mandate forced those groups to violate their faith. And today, 60 national and state pro-life groups are urging the Senate to quickly confirm Gorsuch. They quote his book about assisted suicide where he says, human life is fundamentally and inherently valuable.
To help the judge get to 60 votes needed for confirmation, pro-life groups are targeting Senate Democrats up for re-election next year. Senators will question Gorsuch right behind me all day tomorrow. Lauren?
When will the committee vote on Judge Gorsuch, Jason?
Most likely 2 weeks from today, so that's April 3rd. Several of the more liberal Democrats have announced plans to oppose Gorsuch and seek to block his nomination from a final vote. Republicans do hope to have this whole thing wrapped up, the confirmation process done and the final vote done by the time they go on their Easter recess, which is April 7th.
Okay, correspondent Jason Calvi above that hearing. Thank you so much. Joining us now is John Malcolm, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Malcolm, nice to see you again.
Good to be with you, Lauren.
Everybody I've talked to says, slam dunk, this is an easy one. Judge Gorsuch will be confirmed. Is it because of the Republican majority, or is it because of Judge Gorsuch?
Well, I'd love to be able to say that it's the latter because Neil Gorsuch is a superbly qualified nominee, and really, if there's any right in the world, he will be a Supreme Court justice. But there's a lot of tension on Capitol Hill in a highly politicized environment. And while I still think he would be confirmed, even if the Democrats were in the majority in the Senate, who knows?
Who knows is always you are a true Washingtonian. There's been quite a campaign, both on the left and on the right. Since, I guess, for several weeks I've been saying, let's take a look at one ad by the Judicial Crisis Network in favor of the nomination.
I pledge that if I am confirmed, I will do all my powers permit to be a faithful servant of the Constitution and laws of this great country.
Neil Gorsuch is dedicated to the Constitution.
Have you ever seen this before, where the pros are doing this type of ad campaign?
Not to this degree. First of all, Neil Gorsuch is an adherent of the Constitution. He doesn't believe that judges are simply politicians in robes. He said today in his opening statement that when a judge puts on a robe, he should lose his ego and open his mind. But look, this is a very closely divided Senate, as we just said, and there are some Democrats in states that Donald Trump carried, in some cases by double digits, and so they're trying to put pressure on them to make sure that he is confirmed.
Based on what we saw today, it was just the very beginning.
Sure.
We only saw really his opening arguments. What can we expect over the next day or so?
Well, I think that all of the senators will talk about how important it is for judges to remain independent, while at the same time they're going to try to tie down Judge Gorsuch to whatever particular cases that they happen to like. If it's a case that they think is a good one, they'll try to say that this is settled law and is some super precedent that is entitled to incredible deference. And if it's a case that they don't like, they will say that as a justice he ought to reverse that decision.
And do you think a lot of this is going to be focused on abortion?
I think some of it will be focused on abortion because, after all, it wouldn't be a judicial confirmation hearing if the topic did not come up. He hasn't written anything on the issue of abortion in any of his decisions as a 10th Circuit judge. He did write a book that was published that dealt with physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia that may give some insight into his thinking. And after all, he would be replacing a justice whose views on abortion were quite well known.
And President Trump has said all along that he is going to be in the mold of Antonin Scalia. Thank you so much, John Malcolm, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation.
Good to be with you.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. While the Iraqi prime minister is here in Washington, a car bomb targets a commercial area in Baghdad, killing at least 23 people. 45 others were injured. No one claimed responsibility for the attack, but ISIS has been behind previous bombings in the city. Pope Francis offers his prayers to people killed in northern Peru by floods.
Cara popolazione del Perù, duramente colpita da devastanti alluvioni.
The Holy Father prayed Sunday for the natural disaster victims. A series of storms caused unusually heavy rain and overflowing rivers to kill 72 people since the beginning of the year. The Holy Father asks for forgiveness for the sins and failings of the Church during Rwanda's 1994 genocide. The statement comes after the Pope met today with the Rwandan president. The Vatican says the Church and some priests succumbed to the hatred and violence by participating in the genocide more than 2 decades ago. Hutu extremists reportedly killed more than 800,000 people in 100 days. Some died in churches where they sought refuge. The Rwandan government has long pressured the Church to apologize. The Vatican confirms Pope Francis will visit Cairo, Egypt on April 28th and 29th. The Egyptian government hopes the trip will cement the spirit of tolerance and dialogue among followers of different faiths. For more on the importance of the visit, we go to Rome, where our Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin is standing by. Mary, this 2-day trip will have many facets to it, political as well as religious. Let's start with the political importance.
Lauren, if we think it's been 6 years since the Arab Spring in Egypt, and everything there is still shaky on the grind financially. Unemployment is rampant. People are unhappy with current prospects facing them. And then ISIS-linked insurgency is growing stronger and stronger. Terror attacks becoming more brazen, more frequent. We know that the Pope will meet with the country's president, and the spokesman for the Egyptian president said he hopes this visit will cement a spirit of tolerance and dialogue among the followers of all the different faiths there in the country, and to isolate extremism and terrorism. And the statement from the government also said that President El-Sisi, who met with Pope Francis here in the Vatican in 2014, holds Pope Francis in high regard and admires his moral and spiritual stature in the world, as well as his courageous stances on some international issues. El-Sisi will also meet with President Trump, but at the beginning of April in Washington, and then with Pope Francis at the end of the month, as a way of hopefully creating stronger partnerships with both of these world leaders and cement Egypt's role as a force for greater stability there in the Middle East.
Is his visit being viewed as a support for Christians in the country as they face growing threats from extremists?
Definitely. Lauren, Egypt is a country of 94 million people, and Christians only make up about 10% of that population. The other 90% is Muslim. Christians are often complaining of discrimination, deciding that they've been excluded from top positions in, say, security services or even in academia or diplomatic service. So since his election in 2014, President El-Sisi has sought to reassure Egypt's Christians, promising them equality and protection. But as we know, there have been a series of brutal killings of Christians recently, even in northern Sinai, claimed by the local affiliate of the Islamic State, which has forced these Christians to flee and take safety elsewhere in Egypt. The Islamic group also claimed a suicide bombing back in December that targeted an Orthodox church in the heart of Cairo that killed about 30 people, mostly women. So the Pope's visit will be a sign of comfort for those people who have endured so much. They are the largest community of Christians, Lauren, in the Middle East, and he will likely underline their need to dialogue with their Muslim brothers as a way to fight this extremism.
Okay, Mary Shevlin, thank you so much for that report. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thousands of people stage a demonstration against the handover of a St. Petersburg, Russia church. St. Isaacs Cathedral was taken over by the Soviets and turned into a museum, and now the government wants to give the landmark back to the Russian Orthodox Church. Critics are fighting the move. They're concerned about the growing power of the Orthodox Church in the country. Coming up, Pope Francis praises the man who doesn't speak but obeys. His reflections on St. Joseph. And a holy shrine undergoes a major restoration. See the place where Jesus was resurrected. Pope Francis focuses on Jesus' foster father on this solemnity of St. Joseph.
Perché quando sogniamo le cose grandi, le cose belle, ci avviciniamo al sogno di Dio.
The Holy Father called St. Joseph the man of silence, but a man of tenderness. The solemnity is normally celebrated on the 19th of March, but it's moved to Monday when it falls on a Sunday in Lent. As the fight over President Trump's executive order on immigration continues, Catholic leaders urge compassion in efforts to maintain a secure country. Joining us now is Bishop Emeritus Ricardo Ramirez of Las Cruces, Mexico, New Mexico, which is on the U.S.-Mexican border. Thank you so much, Bishop.
Thank you for inviting me.
Us. For the first time since 9/11, 4 different faith leaders came together in Las Cruces to send a unified message to the president about immigration. What is that message?
Well, the message was basically one of peace and understanding and the acceptance of one another in spite of whatever differences there might be. It was a beautiful celebration. We had Muslims, we had Jews, we had Baha'is, we had Unitarians, we had Christians. It was a beautiful mixture. We hadn't had such a celebration since 9/11 when we all came together in the tragedy.
Did you talk about the practical implications of the executive order?
We didn't directly, but we talked theologically about the immigration questions, especially the respect that everyone is due, because we all have a dignity that God has given us that must be respected. And everyone needs to be respected, no matter where they come from or how they got here.
Even if they got here illegally?
Even if they got here illegally, everybody deserves humane treatment. This is something the Pope has said.
When you're on the ground talking to people right along the border, you know people who have come in legally and then overstay their welcome. Tell me some of the practical day-to-day things that people are asking of you, and what are you telling them?
Well, they're asking for support more than anything else, for understanding. And we know, we do understand, and we want to project that to them. We know that some of you have come from many miles, walking, taking a beastly train, doing however they can across deserts, across jungles, until they get to the border. And because they're so desperate to raise their children in a safe way, in a decent way.
You serve on the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops on the Immigration and Refugee Services Committee, and that's one of the reasons that you're here. Is the Trump administration listening to your concerns on this issue?
Well, we sure hope so, because we're saying an awful lot in defense of the immigrant and the refugee. We want them to understand these people have a human face. Right now, there's 260 million refugees and immigrants all over the world, the most displaced numbers of people that we've had since World War II, and 51% of those millions happen to be children.
Half
so we hope he's
of the 260 are
displaced.
Children. Yes.
That's right. Well, 51% of the 260 million.
That's an incredible number. We are so grateful to you for being able to come here and for all of the work that you're doing. Thank you so much, Bishop Emeritus Ricardo Ramirez of Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Thank you for having me.
A major restoration reveals the inside of Jesus' tomb. Workers just finished peeling away marble to reach what is believed to be the original rock surface of the cave. The site is the centerpiece of one of Christianity's oldest churches, the Holy Sepulchre, and one of its most important shrines. The team found a bench inside, which is the presumed site where Jesus' body would have been laid.
It was really important to see the bench very flat and almost complete from the right to the left, almost for the shape that one man can stay on it.
The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the only place where 6 Christian denominations practice their faith at the same time. Up next, remembering a rock and roll icon. How how Chuck Berry influenced a generation of musicians. And words of wisdom from our foundress, Mother Angelica. On Mondays, we bring you words of wisdom from EWTN foundress Mother Angelica. I need to be detached from my own opinions in order to be open to the quiet inspirations of the Holy Spirit. Only then will I be able to discern what He is saying and what He desires. President Trump's proposed budget cuts the U.S. State Department and Agency for International Development by nearly a third. Last week, Catholic Relief Services released a letter signed by 106 Christian leaders protesting the cuts. Joining us now is Bill O'Keefe, Catholic Relief Services Vice President for Government Relations and Advocacy. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks so much, Lauren.
One of the programs that is likely to be cut is Food for Peace, and you have that in 14 different countries, if I'm not right, and it provides emergency assistance in case of natural disasters. What happens if this is cut?
Well, there are 20 million people right now who are at risk of famine in 4 countries, South Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, and Nigeria, and they're affected by natural disasters, drought, and then conflict as well. And there really is not a plan B for those people because the U.S. is by far the largest and most generous donor for emergency food assistance for situations like this.
Well, give me a percentage, if you could, roughly, about how much the U.S. provides in contrast to Catholic Relief Services. Is it a huge percentage? Are you able to really give a lot of help too?
Sure. We're able to give a lot of help. So is the local church and the church in the United States through CRS. But compared to the United States government in these huge emergencies like this, we cannot mobilize resources at that kind of scale.
How are you going to work with other countries to minimize this impact if this happens?
We'll be working, first of all, with the countries affected, of course, in the local church, and we'll be trying to figure out ways to help people to grow their own food, to buy food in the markets. We'll, of course, raise our own money, but frankly, the EU and other governments of the world just generally do not step up like the United States does. We are so fortunate in this country. We're so generous, and
well, if you see that you are making a difference, is there some sort of, I don't know, message that you could send to the Obama administration why keeping these programs, Trump administration, excuse me, old habit, how we could minimize that impact, or what else does it do? Lower security risks around the country?
Well, I think the Trump administration actually, as they get more into place and understand these programs, is going to take that education and probably change their approach. Frankly, it is an important security consideration. Let's take Ethiopia. Last year, CRS provided food assistance to 2.9 million people in Ethiopia. There was a terrible drought, but it did not turn into a terrible famine.
Why?
And therefore, because Food for Peace and the United States government stepped up and through groups like CRS was able to prevent it from getting out of control. And that kept that country relatively stable. Ethiopia is an ally in the war against terror. It's a critically important country in the Horn of Africa. So that there are security implications to these humanitarian crises.
Right. Very good. Bill O'Keefe, Vice President for Government Relations and Advocacy at the Catholic Relief Services. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Lauren.
Music fans around the world mourn the loss of rock and roll legend Chuck Berry. He was behind a series of classics, including Memphis, Tennessee, Roll Over Beethoven, and Johnny B. Good. His music influenced everyone, from the Beatles and the Rolling Stones to Elvis and the Beach Boys. Berry announced last year he would release his first new album in 38 years called Chuck. The album is still in the works. Chuck Berry was 90 years old. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We leave you with a look at the changing seasons. This is the first day of spring. Go out and enjoy it. Good night, and God bless.